90.3 WHPC. Welcome back to From the Pressbox. And joining us, brother, we've had him on before. A friend of the show, great books all over his career. He's written over 25 books. He is still known, and always will be known, for the Munson book. But he's written other books too. And we can ask him about the book again because it was such a perfectly timed book, and it's a great book. But our guest today is Marty Appel, and he has a new book out called Pinstripes by the Tail, published by Triumph Books. Hello, Marty. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on. Good to be with you.
Yeah, well, we had you on last time, and we waited for your next book, and it came out, so we're here. So I always start off with this question because I think it's important, but you've written 25 books now, so maybe it's a little different. But what made you write this book? Because for those who haven't read it yet, it's like Marty Appel's come to your house or maybe to a bar, and he just starts telling you stories about the Yankees.
Well, the incentive was I didn't think I had another book in me because, frankly, I wasn't sure I had another story to tell. But my agent, Rob Wilson, said, "You're a good storyteller. Why don't you put all your stories down on paper and see if it's a book?" So in 4 weeks, I did. I didn't have to call anybody. I didn't have to do any research. They were all the stories of what I've lived through and what was stored in my brain. I wrote it in 4 weeks.
Wow.
The publisher bought into it, and there it was. And another incentive for me was since my last book, I've had 3 grandsons, all with baseball names, Casey, Matty, and Ty. And I wanted to write a book that I could dedicate to them just so I could say I did.
Oh, wow.
So that was the impetus, really. It's a small impetus, but it worked.
Are they old enough to appreciate the stories? No? No? Okay. But
They're 6, 1, and 1.
okay, but one day they will. That's the beauty of it.
This is good bedtime story material.
By the way, I should repeat myself. I'm Rob Leonard. He's Tim Leonard. So just in case, the difference of the voices, I'm Rob and he's Tim. Tim, you got a question?
Well, I mean, I was just reading through this, and some of these. I mean, there are funny stories. There are a couple of slightly scary stories. The Venezuela one being being the scarier one. I for whatever reason, this one struck me and because I've done similar drives, but you were driving with Dick Hauser in Oneonta.
Right.
And I back in my early sports writing days, I remember covering ECAC hockey and making drives from Cornell to Colgate. And it sounded like one of those nights because it often was snowing and snowing pretty seriously. So the drives were kind of tedious. But tell this story because I would rather have you tell it. But it involves Dick Hauser and an umpire. So just go ahead.
Yeah, Dick Hauser was a terrific guy. He was our third base coach for many years, and he and I were driving. I was the driver, and we were driving up to Oneonta for a winter sports banquet. And when you make that drive from New York City, you're going through a lot of small towns, and you never know what you're going to encounter, a deer running across the street or whatever. But at one point, in the middle of a very heavy snow, so I'm driving like 20 miles an hour, we see a guy shoveling out his driveway. And as I approach and get closer, I say to Hauser, "Isn't that the umpire, Al Salerno?" I mean, this was so random in the middle of nowhere. And Hauser released an expletive and said, "Keep driving," which is what capsulizes baseball players' memories when it comes to umpires.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, were you shocked when he said that? You must have been.
I laughed, as I recall. I mean, it would have been my inclination to stop and say, "Hey, Al, how are you?"
Which I'm sure he would have said, "What are you doing here?"
Hauser's reaction was more on line with baseball players and umpires.
Yes. Absolutely.
There's so many stories in this book. I mean, sometimes it's a couple of pages, sometimes it's a paragraph. That's one of the things I really like about this book. But one of the things that gets me just a little bit is, and I'm shocked that it's coming from you, that you don't believe that Thurman Munson should be in the Hall of Fame, which I'm shocked by because of your book, your friendship with him. Now, the thing is, Timothy believes like you do, and I don't. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, and I'm not a Yankee fan. He is.
Yeah, I'm actually a big Yankee fan, but
So-
I see the reasons for. I mean, to me, the biggest reason for Munson not being in the Hall of Fame is longevity, and that's a big issue, and especially because the one guy that he always gets compared to from his era is Carlton Fisk, who was one of the biggest catchers in terms of longevity. So that's an automatic to me. That's an automatic advantage for Fisk over Munson, and it kind of, I don't know, it doesn't make Munson's candidacy any stronger. I don't know. Just talk about what your reasons are, Marty.
Yeah, I know people expect me to be more supportive of him, and honestly, he was a friend, and I would get a lot of happiness if he got elected.
Yeah, same
But
here.
objectively speaking, if I went to Thurman Munson today and I said, Thurman, here's a candidate for the Hall of Fame who lost 18 elections, 15 by the baseball writers, 3 more by various veterans committees, think he should be in? And I think Thurman would look at me and shrug his shoulders and say, he's 0 for 18? Hello? I don't think so.
Yeah.
That part is true, but I don't know. I know we know why he's not in because of longevity reasons, but I always think, and maybe you can correct me because you saw him pitch, Sandy Koufax didn't have the greatest beginning of his career. It was the end of his career that he was superhuman, but it wasn't, to me, enough seasons to throw him in the Hall of Fame. But he's in the Hall of Fame.
Well, he was from such an elite class that they said he came down from a higher league.
Yeah.
I think of Don Mattingly, who I also love dearly and would get great pleasure out of his being in the Hall of Fame. And when I think of Mattingly, I think of Kirby Puckett, who kind of had the same career, except Puckett's last 5 years were his big years, and Mattingly's first 5.
Right.
The lesson being, leave them wanting more at the end, and have your big years at the end.
Yeah, that's because Guidry had a great run too. It was about 5 years also, and he's not going to the Hall of Fame. But you think about if it's 5 great years, is it better than 10 okay years?
Well, Thurman, you could say, really had 10 outstanding years.
Yeah.
But John Thorne, the Major League Baseball historian, said, look, it's sad to comment like this. And he had the worst kind of injury. He had death. But injury has derailed a lot of Hall of Fame careers. I look to Jacob deGrom right now. Is Jacob deGrom going to come back and wind up in the Hall of Fame?
No.
None of us know.
No.
But, it's a similar kind of argument.
If
Yeah,
Munson,
and the other, I mean, for me, the other issue with Munson was when he did pass in the plane crash, his knees were gone. The Yankees were looking for positions for him to play because he couldn't catch anymore. He wasn't going to have many more seasons because it didn't seem to me, and obviously you could answer this question better. I don't think he wanted to be a full-time DH.
I think he wanted to play the field. He was actually an infielder part-time when he was in high school in Kent State. But the Yankees were playing him at first base and in the outfield, and he really didn't have enough home run pop in his bat for those positions.
Right.
So I think he was destined to be a DH, and he might have been destined to be the Cleveland Indians DH. So his Yankee career may have been winding down, but of course today he's memorialized as an all-time great Yankee, as he should be.
yes, it should be. Batted .292. I always wonder if that was over 300, whether he, be in for
Whether
that.
that changes something.
Yeah, it's like we a while ago we had Bill Madden on, and we were talking about Rusty Staub, and the last 4 or 5 years with the Mets, he was actually supposed to play a lot more. Bill told us that the Mets had told Rusty, "Oh, we're going to play you every day," and he ended up being the pinch hitter guy. And if he had played every day, he would have had over 3,000 hits. and there's a very good chance he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
I was a big Rusty supporter. He was a friend, and I used to think, I mean, people may not have noticed this, but when he retired, he was 5th all-time in games played. Now,
Wow.
it's true a lot of them were as a pinch hitter towards the end of his career. He must have pinch hit 100 times a season.
Seemingly, yeah.
But Rusty was also of note. Every place he went, he was like the most popular guy on the team. The fan base was there, whether he was in Houston or Montreal or Detroit or New York or Texas.
Yep.
They loved him wherever he went.
And his restaurant had really good ribs.
Absolutely.
I got a question. One of the things in the book is, I like a good Joe DiMaggio story, and when it involves Mickey Mantle, it's always even a better story. Old Timers Game. There's a great story in there about, the greatest living player of all time. It had to be Joe DiMaggio. He always had to be the last, but that didn't always happen, did it?
No, after Mickey Mantle retired and we had the sensational Mickey Mantle in 1969, Mickey was introduced next to last at Old Timers Day a few weeks later, DiMaggio last. But Mickey's fans were younger and louder, and the excitement of Mickey's retirement was still in their minds. So Mickey's applause and cheers drowned out DiMaggio's introduction. And we decided, incorrectly it turned out, but we decided that going forward, we'd introduce DiMaggio next to last so he got the full benefit of his cheers, and then Mickey last. So we did that in 1970, and Joe was so insulted that he told our clubhouse man, Pete, "That's it, I'm never coming back." Oh, so show would have been a horror show. So we ran through fires to appease him and let him know we love him, and he'd always be introduced last. And Old Timers Day meant a lot to him, too, because he returned at 30 old without he only missed when he was in the hospital. So it was important to him and, of course, important to us. We thought we made a good decision, but our mistake there was not running it by Joe and getting his sign off on it.
Right. It seems like a small thing, but for a guy like Joe DiMaggio, it was a huge thing.
He was a very proud man. Marty, who was it who came up with introducing him as the greatest living Yankee? I mean, was that DiMaggio or his people, or was that somebody in the Yankees hierarchy?
It was greatest living player, not greatest living Yankee.
Okay.
And in 1969, baseball's the centennial of professional baseball, there were national polls done, which were very important at the time, and Babe Ruth was named the greatest player of all time, and Joe DiMaggio was named the greatest living player. So that was fresh on everybody's minds in the 69 and early 70s, and it was just natural to bestow that honor as part of his introduction. And now, baseball's greatest living player, Joe DiMaggio, was a great way to introduce him. It came to be seen that he insisted on that introduction wherever he was introduced, but that wasn't the case.
Oh, all right. Okay.
He didn't insist on it. It was just so natural. It was just so out there. He didn't object to it, of course.
Obviously not.
But it took on a life of its own as though he insisted on it happening.
He was also, if you think about his career after playing baseball, he was known to people in the 70s and the 80s, not just because he showed up at Old Timers Game, but he did advertising. He was
Mr. Coffee.
He was Mr. Coffee for years. Bowery Bank. Those are two major things. You see him on TV every commercial break. It was very, not every player gets that after they retire.
Yeah, well, he was special, and he was, I say in the book, his rookie year, 1936, he was Joe DiMaggio. And then he developed some urban sophistication and hung out with important people, and by his second year, he had become Joe DiMaggio. And he remained that forever. And even his teammates were sort of tentative in approaching him. Tommy Henrik said they never went to dinner together. Joe always had his own crowd that he went out with.
Yeah. You sort of for Channel 11 doing the Yankee games, right?
Oh, yeah.
I got a question for you because it's something I saw on Facebook, and it's a legitimate thing, and I wondered if you saw it. Channel 11 has been going through their archives, and they've been finding games and newscasts and all this, but they're finding Yankee games from the 70s, and I was wondering, have you seen any of them? Have they approached you about any of these games that might be around on three-quarter tape? And did you ever save a game along the way, on a 1-inch tape or whatever? Because, it might have been a big game or something, but, let's be honest with you, archiving in baseball or any sport wasn't that important in the 60s and early 70s. Did you ever grab a tape, or have they approached you about some of these games they have?
I don't have anything myself.
Okay.
I wouldn't take any classified documents home with me.
Good stuff, Marty. Good stuff.
What, you mean you wouldn't put them in your bathroom?
Yeah.
No.
Marty's got boxes of 1-inch tapes in his bathroom at home.
Yeah, when I was executive producer in the late 80s and early 90s, I would tape every game on VHS tape just so we had a record of it, because they weren't saving them. It just took up too much room on 3/4-inch tape. So I was saving everything on VHS, which I just left after I left WPIX. But, of course, the broadcast quality was not there on VHS tape. It would be hard to, it could go on YouTube, but you couldn't put it on air on television now.
No, you couldn't. But it's, there's so many things. Like when Tom Seaver died a year and a half ago, one of the things I said to Tim was, he's so famous for being the franchise, he's being a Met, but there's not a lot of real footage of him pitching. And it's hard to believe, there's stuff from '73 and the '69 World Series, but none of it, not a lot of else is out there, which is hard to believe.
It's true. When they started doing This Week in Baseball, which Mel Allen hosted, MLB was better at saving tapes.
Right.
So things from that era, I think, do exist at MLB's archives, but really, just for space considerations, WPIX was just not saving Yankee games unless it was some awesome highlight that they said we better hold on to that, like Mattingly hitting all those Grand Slam home runs in one season,
or even Roger Maris, or someone saved the Maris thing when Rizzuto yells "Holy cow!" before he hits the ball.
But it's the home run that was saved, not the whole game.
Right. No, it's true. As a historian, do you have papers you're going to be donating to, college or the Baseball Hall of Fame? You've been around and seen so much.
I do, and I will, but not ready to talk about it just yet.
Okay, well, we know Bill Madden donated his papers to some college or something, when we talked to him about that. So, excuse me.
Marty, I want to ask you about, I'm going to ask this question for my brother and the fans of Beatles songs who might be listening to this show as well. I want to talk to you about your time spent with, quote, Johnny from Brooklyn. The story goes in the book that you were at WMCA Radio, and John Lennon and Yoko Ono were there, but Yoko was the guest because she was plugging her album. Tell that story and what some of your memories are from that. Yeah,
there are a few stories in the book that are not strictly baseball, but wouldn't have happened if I didn't have my Yankee background. And one of the things was the Yankee games were on WMCA Radio in New York in those days. And so I knew the people there, and one night one of the producers called me and said, John Lennon and Yoko Ono are going to be here tomorrow night. Yoko will be the guest. John will just accompany her. Would you like to come by? Well, I'm as big a Beatles fan as there is, and the chance to come and meet John Lennon and hang out with him was unbelievable to me. So, of course, I went, and as described, Yoko was the guest. It was the Barry Gray show. Yoko was the guest, plugging her new album. I had my greatest suck-up moment of all time when I said to John, gosh, I love Yoko's new album. I think he saw right through me. But in any case, we were out away from the studio. There was just 5 of us with John Lennon for 2 hours. And he was fantastic and funny, and he was having a good day because he was just in a great mood. And at one point, he asked an engineer if he could pretend to be a caller and call into the show, thinking Yoko wouldn't recognize him. So it was actually a brilliant moment. They set it up so he would call in. Barry Gray took the call, and John said, "Yeah, I'm Johnny from Brooklyn, and I had a question for Yoko Ono." And he said, "Go ahead, caller." And he said, "Yeah, could you tell me if the Beatles will be getting back together?" Which was the last thing Yoko wanted.
I was going to say, I'm sure Yoko was thrilled to hear that question.
Yeah, it wasn't a question about her new albums.
Well, Marty, I do a Beatles show every Friday, Beatles songs, and I hope you can get to listen to it. I've never heard this story. This was Yoko, not John and Yoko showing up
Right.
on because it was John and Yoko. Someone would have taped it and would have been floating around with the collectors and stuff. But because it's Yoko specifically, maybe people didn't tape it as much or were into it as much. So it was nice to see that type of story. And you said it was 1971, so I think it was Approximate Infinite Universe, that album. So.
Remember the name of her albums?
It's actually a pretty good album, actually. So
my brother knows this stuff, Marty. It's scary.
That's a good story because you forget, you think of John Lennon and the Beatles, you normally think of WABC. Especially he was interviewed by Cosell in '74, and he did a lot of interviews, and I did not remember or. I actually called people about it. They don't have tapes on it, so other people forgot about it too. So it's actually a nice little story in the book, and that's what this book's about. Stories like that, but more about baseball, of course, because that's your specialty. But you also worked, and I didn't realize this until I saw the inner book sleeve thing. You worked on the movie 61 with that Billy Crystal did.
Oh, that was great. I mean, first of all, it was a terrific movie. And
it was.
People remember it today as a theatrical film, not just an HBO movie.
Right.
But to work with Billy Crystal and to relive the 61 season and the fine actors that were in that, what an opportunity, what an experience that was.
Well, he was also a huge Yankee fan, and I'm not sure, it's one of those things like, only Coppola or an Italian can do The Godfather. And I think with that movie 61, it had to be someone like Billy Crystal, who grew up loving the Yankees and has the story about thinking that, when he first went to a Yankee game that Babe Ruth was buried in the back of Yankee Stadium, Monument Park. So
a lot of people thought that. Yeah,
I did. When the first game we went to, I pointed to my mom and dad said, "Oh no, it was just statues." So, but we didn't know.
Yeah, it was, urban gossip. It was believed by a lot of people that those were graves.
Yeah, well, the Yankees probably could have taken as a tax donation too, like other people have. Anyway, Marty, do you have a website or a thing if people want to contact you or?
Sure, it's Appel PR from my public relations days. .com, appelpr.com.
Okay, and the book's doing well. Is this your last book?
Well, you never say never, but in my mind, I think it was my last book. I wanted to do one for my grandchildren. I'm not sure I have anything else left to say. And the other thing is, publishers today are not going for smaller titles. I mean, you could say Pinstripes by the Tail is not, destined to be a classic with Mark Twain's novels. But the thing is, if I was to go to a publisher today and say, you know what, there hasn't been a good biography of Mel Ott done, I wouldn't get any offers.
Yeah.
Publishers today are really, the industry is celebrity-driven. if you've got a TV show and you write a book, you're going to get on the bestseller list.
Right.
So these are rough days for filling in the gaps in baseball history because the publishing world isn't really interested in it.
And these are the type of stories that add to the color of a person you might be looking back on who maybe wasn't huge, but at the time was pretty well known. Or, I like to look back at like Billy Martin. A lot of people don't know who he is anymore. Even though he's the manager.
And there's also been 10 Billy Martin biographies.
Right.
Nobody's going to say yes to that one.
I'm going to ask you about one more thing before we leave.
Sure.
New Year's Eve, 1974. Tim Leonard and I are watching the Sugar Bowl on ABC television, and all of a sudden the announcement comes: the New York Yankees have signed Catfish Hunter. You were there. What do you remember about it?
I remember doing a press release on a mimeograph machine, maybe the last one in America, and getting ink all over my shirt.
Uh-oh.
So that remains a solid memory of that night. But it was thrilling. I mean, his name is kind of forgotten today, I think, but he was the best pitcher in baseball at the time, and he was a free agent, and every team wanted him. And from his signing came the first time we were saying $1 million in terms of a ball player. He actually got $3.5 million. And the first time we were talking about long-term contracts, his was 5 years. And one of the first times we ever talked about agents representing players. He kind of changed everything, and he set up for the following year the arbitration in which free agency would be defined. And the impetus for the players banding together to hold out for free agency was the Hunter signing, which proved what players were really worth on the open market. So it was historic in so many ways, and it was a thrill for me to just be there, even though it was New Year's Eve, part of baseball history.
How far in advance did you know? I mean, obviously they were talking about it, for the week, but how far in advance do you get the notification? Or do they say, like, in advance, hey, we're talking to Catfish? Or do you just find out about it?
I think it was mid-afternoon that Gabe Paul called me and said, assemble the press. We're going to have a press conference tonight. So they were flying in a private plane from Hertford, North Carolina to New York for the announcement. But we know in baseball nothing is real until that contract is signed, which he didn't sign until he got to our offices. And it was so everybody had to interrupt their New Year's Eve plans. Every member of the press was a really packed house for.
I know. I can just see some of the people, like the reporters, saying, "Hold! I got a party to go to. What is this crap?"
Yeah. Well, I was at one myself in New Jersey with Ron Bloomberg and some other people, and I had to excuse myself, drive to Flushing, where we had our offices then, and soil my shirt with mimeograph ink.
Well, we've been talking with Marty Appel. He is the author of Pinstripes by the Tail, published by Triumph Books. Thank you, Marty, for joining us again. We really appreciate it. And good luck with the book. And if you have any autograph signings on Long Island or New York, let us know. We'd love to promote it for you.
Thank you. Nice being with you, as always, and talk to you again.
Take care.
Thanks, Marty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College. Good interview, brother.
Yes, Marty Appel. He's
got a lot
he
of
is
stuff.
correct. He is a great storyteller.
He is. So, anyway, yesterday, brother, we hung out with our cousin Andrew.
Yes, we did.
And one of the things he asked me, I don't know if you were there, but I know I was there.
I was there.
Okay, you know what he asked me? He goes, "Who's Big Ed? Who's this Big Ed guy?"
And you're looking in your phone for pictures, and you couldn't find him.
I did not have a picture.
Unbelievable.
I did not have a picture of Big Ed in my phone.
I was horrified.
And so, Ed, we're going to take a picture of you later. But he was asking, he goes, "Why do you always mention his show?" And I go, "Because it's a great show."
Because he's Big Ed.
and he's Big Ed, and you should listen to it.
You just took a picture of me last week with that camera you had.
That was the other camera. That was the film camera. So
Yeah, my brother's still carrying around those old disposable cameras. This thing's probably 9 years
I
old.
found it while I was cleaning, brother.
Yeah, great.
So
It's still 9 years old, and the film is more than likely destroyed already.
yes. Anyway, your WHPC weather forecast powered by Pantanos with locations in Hewlett, Uniondale, Garden City Park, Freeport, and coming soon to Levittown. This afternoon it's going to be cloudy and it's going to get really rainy tonight, and about 6 o'clock or so it's going to start to really get rainy. Is that a word, rainy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, it's going to be a lousy day, bro.
Okay, and currently outside it is about 70 degrees. Anyway, coming up next is Big Ed. You should listen to him. He does a great show every Monday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon.
Big Ed was telling me before, brother, he's very excited about Lionel Messi joining Inter Miami, coming to MLS.
I don't blame you, man. And didn't he turn
Very
like $1
excited.
trillion or something from the Saudis?
He turned down a lot of that Saudi oil money. That means Manchester City will have more to spend and try to win another Champions League.
I know, but the funny thing is, I mean, how do you turn down all that money? I mean,
Because he's got all that money.
Oh, okay.
He's got his own all that money. Messi is not poor.
okay, just checking.
There comes a point. There comes a point where happiness and quality of living. He could have gone back to Barcelona, Messi.
Right.
But Messi he can't leave his house in Spain. He can't leave his house in Argentina. So yeah, come to MLS in Miami where people aren't as insane. And enjoy something relatively close to a normal life, as close as Messi can have. Messi couldn't get to his house after Argentina won the World Cup because so many people were crowded around. Thousands of people crowded around your house. How do you live like that?
Ed loves when people come to
That's
his house.
true. That's true. They crowd around Big Ed's house.
Ed used to have these giant parties, man.
Big Ed Mansion.
People would be driving by. He said, "Come on in, come on in."
Come on in. Come on into the Big Ed Mansion. Go hang out in the Big Ed Grotto.
One more thing, brother. WHPC welcomes 90s bands, the Gin Blossoms, Tonic, and Fastball to the Paramount in Huntington on Tuesday,
Nice.
September 12th. Tickets are available now, but you can try to win tickets right now on the WHPC app. Download the app and click the Win Tickets button now to enter to win. Good luck from the voice of Nassau Community College and the WHPC app. My name is Rob Leonard. Thank you for listening. He is Tim Leonard. This show becomes a podcast later. Take care and bye-bye.
The views expressed on air are not necessarily those of WHPC, its management, or Nassau Community College. Responsible opposing viewpoints will be considered by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu or by mail at WHPC 1 Education Drive, Garden City, New York 11530. Thanks for listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.